A very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk. We are delighted to be with you on the airways of Second Advent Radio and, of course, through our various social media platforms. Let's Talk is a program sponsored by the South Leeward Conference of Seventh Adventists. I'm your host, Dr. Carson Greene. And from week to week, we share important discussions on various issues impacting church members and the wider community. Today we are continuing a very important discussion we started last week. We are looking at this matter of masking abuse, hurt, infidelity, and unfaithfulness behind the cloak of the church. We had a wonderful discussion last week. The feedback that we received from many of you, our viewers and listeners, was encouraging, and we're going to be continuing that discussion. Today we have with us again Pastor Stanton, the Family Life Director for the South Leeward Conference. But before we begin the discussion, we would like to invite you to have a word of prayer with us, shall we? Yes. Almighty Father and our God, we pray that you will be with us as we share with our friends. We ask for your wisdom and your guidance. Be with our guest, Pastor Adams. And as we discuss this very important subject, we pray that you will provide illumination and understanding in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Pastor Adams, good day and welcome back.
Yes, good afternoon. It's always a joy and delight to be here. Let's talk. As you said, it's becoming the talk of the tongue. Dealing with the very educative and very important issues, as you rightly said, Dr. Greene, that affect both the church and the community. So everyone can benefit, and I just trust that this time that we will share, we can share information that will clarify some things and then offer education and insights into this very critical and even disturbing area because of how profound and all-encompassing what we're talking about is in our society as well as in our church.
Well, you know,
the
subject is important, especially as we said last week. We see all of this social media outcry against some of the quote-unquote evils that are apparently taking place under the guise of Christianity. And that's a concern for us. That's a concern for us as church leaders, as church administrators. And so we want to talk about this because at the end of the day, God's church is God's church. And while, as you shared last week, Pastor Adams, the church is not perfect, we are not to make excuse for lowering the standards of God's church.
Definitely.
So last week we addressed the matter of church leaders using the church to mask infidelity and unfaithfulness. We went in depth, although we ran out of time. Now, we want to address the matter of emotional abuse. Same issue, same area, hiding behind the cloak of the church. You know, we are still considering this whole matter of masking, you know, covering up behind the church. Now, I once encountered a situation where a local elder was functioning, preaching and instructing church members, you know, establishing profound biblical concepts with respect to family life and how one should relate to his or her spouse. But his wife was suffering in silence from neglect and emotional abuse. So let's begin with this. Is it fair to say that, well, even before I ask the question, maybe I should preface by asking, or positing rather, that one of the reasons why we have emotional abuse in the church, and I'm speaking specifically men against women, you know, so the woman suffering emotional abuse, is because there seems to be some misogynistic attitude among some men. So let's begin with this. Is it fair to say that there is this this tendency of some of our men in our congregations, and I'm talking across Christendom. I'm not necessarily limited to the Adventist Church, although that is included in the basket. But misogynistic tendencies tend to be rife among Christian believers. True or false?
Very, very true. And I just want to preface what I would say by saying that abuse doesn't wear a face. And it will show up in all strata of society, religious, not religious. And so the scenario that you were giving with the elder who preached and talked the ideal and presented the family life and so, yes, the best example of family life is what you live. Because if you're a family life educator and you're presenting, I mean, we're not perfect, but at least we should set an example as to what it really is. And we should also admit and let people know that, well, even though I'm a presenter, I'm a family life educator, but I let my audience know that I am not a perfect man, not a peach. These are these mistakes I made along the way, and these are these issues we have, and we have to still deal with them. So it's real, just making it real, as I think I mentioned last week. But let's look at the word misogyny. Is very, very, and I'm glad that you're going in this direction. I must commend you for taking the bull by its horn and talking very candidly to this issue. Because like I'm saying, that we can mask it in the church, because you remember we said last week that people see the church as ideal, and therefore, even if when we wear a facade, that these things doesn't exist here, you all are perfect, ready for translation, so you really don't have these issues, these things belong to out there, far from the truth, right? Because you see, this misogyny really is, it's a real contempt, prejudice, hatred against women and girls, right? And you can have some society, particularly those societies, that attitude has become normative because of the patriarchal nature of those societies, and the social construct that exists in some societies where men see women as lesser. And so it is a form of sexism that see women in a lower status than men. But that is not biblical. And I think in the course of conversation and discussion this afternoon, we will have to address that, because there is a place where theology parts company with sociology for us to get it right. And therefore, this education is necessary for the church. There's a point, and that's why I'm glad that I did both, right? Theology parts company with sociology and psychology, because psychology could be toxic in some areas as well as sociology, but biblical theology straightens that out. And that's the benefit the church has, that we can understand and correct this problem of our humanity, because sin has really messed us up in ways that has created these problems that we're addressing here. And therefore, there's a biblical answer to this. So that's basically what it is. We have this. And apart from expressing this hatred, there are other ways in which, this misogynistic attitude would manifest itself, like favoring men against women. So you might have in a spiritual community, because you said cross-denominational, last week I did mention that this cross-denominational study has revealed quite a lot of things. So we're talking to Christendom. There are some religious organizations where women, men favor, women are not favored at all. Men are favored over women, There's strong beliefs. There's strong belief in what is called a traditional gender role. This is, women should not lead. They are too emotional, they are too this, they are too the other, only men should lead.
Now I've heard some people say and of course I'm not agreeing with this, but I'm just putting forth an argument that I have heard some people say, that the Bible itself and some feminist movements have said that. Now you have correctly stated that our approach is the biblical approach. So up front, we want to declare that we are Bible-based. Yes, we are going to be talking a lot of issues relating to sociology and psychology, and as trained counselors, we have that psychological background, but fundamentally we like to say that we are Bible-based.
Yes, there's a point where we part company.
We do recognize and understand that ultimately God is the one who created. So I was making the point that some individuals have charged the Bible with being misogynistic. They say that, there is this evidence in the Bible, and I'm glad you highlighted. I should have, in my earlier discourse, kind of explained what I meant by misogyny, but you have clarified that. But there are some people who say that the Bible itself is misogynistic, and that we see that women are suppressed, that women are treated as second-class citizens. I like to suggest to them that the Bible is a practical book. It's a book with a historical context, and that God relates to us through our culture. But I see Jesus as coming to demonstrate that women are important and equal. In fact, I remember when I was doing my master's program, my thesis from the book of Luke was the social liberation motive in the book of Luke Acts, showing particularly that Luke was deliberate in demonstrating that Jesus had a woman liberation agenda, how he had women following him around, etc. He came to lift their standards, to establish the fact that, hey, listen, women are not supposed to be treated as second-class citizens, but as equals. Yes. I just thought I would throw that in.
Yeah. Well, you have run ahead of me because you peeped my notes and saw the theology, because one of the talking point in this discussion, I am going right there, beginning from the beginning, the Genesis, what God intended when he made us. But we're going to get there. I hope time would allow us to. But I was making the point how this attitude manifests itself. And it's so very pronounced, not only in society, but in the church. And we have to admit that. And that is why some denominations don't want women as their spiritual leader. They would not ordain women to leadership position. Well, I think we are coming around. At least we have come half the way. We are in some denominations that have gone ahead to ordain women. So we have this conversation in the local level in which we operate, like local leadership of the church. There have been some tensions as to whether women should lead or not. So there's no respect or regard for women, their time and their efforts, ignoring or speaking over women, rejecting a woman's idea or stealing a woman's idea and not giving credit for it. All of these ways are ways in which it manifests itself. And in fact, this attitude strikes at the very core of the, what I would say, at the very core of the characteristic, the personality of women. What is it that make women women? And there are certain things that women do what is it? Characteristics, things like their appearance, those things are very valuable to them. Their sexual purity, you see, their submissiveness. And so sometimes we attack those things, It is not easy when a man attacks a woman in terms of appearance. You look like a slob. That is not an easy thing. Or a woman is referred to with a bitch name. You're a bitch or something like that. You're talking to a woman's sexual purity. But society does all of these. Those people who have this misogynistic attitude, males, all is in an attempt to attack the very beauty and the character of women. What it is that is significant and important to them, you see. So it has become so very pronounced.
Now,
and not just pronounced to the point where it has become very normative, you know, like just
And
society has
wanna,
accepted this.
I want to pick it up right there. That it has become normative. Now, let's get real. Yeah, you hinted at it, but I want to talk to it. We do have female pastors and we have female elders, but we do have congregations right in our own conference where some men become very unsettled if a woman is elected to be the first elder of the church. Or if that particular church or district is assigned a female pastor. And I've had individuals tell me, listen, you know, out of respect for the church, I'm going to not make a fuss, but deep down inside, I don't believe a woman should lead. So there are these tendencies that people have. And like I said, some people try to come up with biblical reasons why it should not be. We are not here necessarily studying that this afternoon. We are talking more about the aspect of the emotional abuse, but it is related.
Yes,
and that's what I want to get at. It's related.
It is related.
So we do have a situation where maybe societal standards, maybe otherwise, but there is certainly this culture that says that there are some things that a woman should not do, and leadership is one of them. I am wondering what effects, you know, the manifestation of this misogynistic attitude in society and in the church, because we can perhaps understand it in society, but in the church is supposed to take its standard from God. And so I'm asking, what effect can this have on the emotional state of women?
Well, both in the church and out of the church, it does have an emotional effect on women, emotional and psychological effect on women. In fact, we say that they are both the same thing. Emotional, psychological abuse, one thing, or mental abuse, same thing we're talking about. And serious effect, because remember we said man is not a dichotomy, you know. We are a multi-dimensional being. So what affects us in one way, you know, a long time we say mind over matter, because we are not a dichotomy. God has made us as multi-dimensional beings. And so our mental states can affect our physical and spiritual states. And I was amazed when I saw that. And incidentally, as I read the literature, psychological literature, they are coming around to say, yes, that is so. Which is really, so it is true. They are coming back, even though the secular researchers, psychology, they're saying that is so. And so man is not a dichotomy, it's a multidimensional unity. And when we talk about man, we're talking man in generic sense. So, but we're definitely talking about women now and how this thing affects. So the state of a woman's mental, psychological, emotional well-being is affected by this behavior and this attitude that men portray. And how is it that has happened? You could have issues of anxiety, depression, eating disorders. So you can both have, psychological, mental issues arriving, physical issues arising. And so what we're actually saying is that you are actually troubling or messing with the mental health of women. So we can be affected in all those ways, because when I talk about depression, anxiety, those are classified. You go, well, this instrument that we use in clinical work is the DSM-5, which is the Bible, the psychological Bible that we use in that practice. And these are listed as disorders. So you have eating disorders, you have low self-esteem, you have, or what we call disesteem. I was sitting in a class where we were doing the theology of health, and we were talking about the issue of disesteem, is reducing the worth of a person. And any act of dehumanization or reducing the personhood of somebody is a precursor to other forms of abuse. So we have to understand how far reaching this thing, because if I reduce your value, if I depersonalize you as a person, then I can harm you, I could hurt you. So we are talking about how we are, and incidentally, this week is the week of stewardship. That person, that woman, is God's creation. And so we are actually sinning by hurting God's creation in these ways, so that if I reduce you and I to a lesser person, lesser than, I can inflict pain upon you, I can hurt you in other ways. And all the psychological literature have shown of that emotional abuse usually precedes other form of abuse.
Now, I mean, there's so many issues you have raised there.
Yes.
That any one of them we can take and expand on it for the rest of the afternoon. But I want to zero in on something specific here, right? Because somebody out there may be saying, well, I mean, this is normal. People get abused all the time. But here's our situation. We have a situation where, and let's take, I dare to say, the average congregation, whether it be Seventh Adventist, Baptist, Catholic, or whatever, the average congregation on a Saturday or a Sunday, you are going to find the majority of persons worshiping in that congregation to be women. We have a challenge with our men. That's the point I'm making here. We have a challenge with our men. Men seem somehow to be not as ambitious as the women. So women are pursuing higher education. They're therefore getting respectable employment. A lot of men have dropped out of school. The only place you find more men than women commonly is in the prison, etc. So men need to pull up their socks. And perhaps one of the ways men are fighting back, unfortunately, one of the ways, is that they're trying to assert the authority by saying, I'm in charge in this house, you listen to what I say. And then they quote the Bible, women, submit yourselves unto your husbands. And they use that to suggest that I'm the man, I'm in charge, you take my orders. And because they feel threatened, because here's a woman, she's probably making more money than him, or she is in a better position in society with respect to her employment, with respect to her education, with respect to her status. And so the man feels as though, hey, my wife is outshining me. I better do something about it. And his way of reacting, sadly, is to try to control.
Yes, control.
So at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about.
Any form of abuse, the bottom line is control. It is a pattern of coercive behavior to control somebody else. Notice what it said, the definition. It is a pattern of behavior. And so it's not just physical abuse, because we're not addressing physical abuse, but emotional abuse is equally as devastating, because I just showed you what are the consequences. Right. In fact, in some literature, they're saying that if you tell me all these harsh, demeaning, derogatory things, you're messing with my head, with my brain. I can't take out my brain and leave it home and go to work. That thing is ringing through my head all day. What you said to me, what names you called me, emotional abuse you're talking about. You see, so it is to gain back power and control. And because we're saying we are not just talking to religion alone and our membership, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm a Caribbean man, and I can relate this to our context. And I humbly beg to differ when you say that people are saying that it is normal. No, abuse is never normal, because abuse is never right. But society has not responded to abuse the way that it should. But now we are beginning to have more and more conversation. There are a lot of educational programs about abuse, and we're talking about all of that, you see. And to the degree that abuse is tolerated, to the same degree it is perpetrated, be it in the church or in secular society. And that is why we have to raise up our voice. If there's anybody who needs to talk to this, in a very candid and frank way, must be religious people.
Well, that's why we are discussing the subject.
Must be religious people, because we are God's creation, and none of God's creation, and we are discussing women here, none of God's creation must be harmed, women nor children, nor men.
That's correct. Next week we're going to talk about children, hopefully.
Yeah.
But that is precisely why we are discussing the subject, because it is not enough for individuals to say, well, that's normal, quote unquote.
No.
There must not be normalcy attached to anything that is unbiblical.
Yes. Society cannot accept an abnormal behavior as being normal and say it is okay. The church neither can accept an abnormal behavior and say it is normal. Neither. We must, because remember I said last week when we were having the conversation, we have to admit to the pain and brokenness and the fallenness of humanity that manifests itself in these ways. Because if you ask me, and from the biblical perspective or from the religious perspective, abuse is always satanic. Abuse is satanic.
Correct.
And one of my authors said, abuse is satanic, says E.G. White, Ellen G. White. Abuse is satanic. The disposition to cause pain to any of God's creation is satanic, and a record goes up to heaven. And I'm making this quotation particularly for church people to hear, my church people to hear, that Ellen White's theology is correct in terms of what the Bible says. Any disposition to cause pain to any of God's creation is satanic.
So if you have a gentleman, and I'm going to balance it, I'm going to be objective, but first let's deal with this. So if you have a gentleman who is a leader in the church, and he is controlling, I want to go back to that word, he is controlling his wife. She is not allowed to express certain opinions. She's not allowed to say certain things, and he has intimidated her. Then you are saying, in effect, that gentleman is not faithful to his Christian principles.
Definitely not.
Because he is robbing this woman of being her true self.
Yes.
And the value that she's supposed to be adding to the relationship, she's not able to.
Exactly. In fact, Peter came clear to say that if a man abuses his spouse or his household, his prayers are hindered. He should not even talk to God. His prayers are hindered. It's straight as that. Peter said that.
So let's, because we have so much to cover today, let's talk a little bit about, I did say I'm going to be objective. So I want to at this time suggest that, and some of the men may be crying out, well, there are situations where men also suffer emotional abuse.
Yes.
Right? Now you did mention to some extent what abuse looks like, and I want us to examine that a little more. But first, men also suffer emotional abuse. There are some situations where a man, because of pride, society says the man is supposed to be in charge. His wife, however, is the one, we use the term, the wife wears the pants. We know what that means, right? So she gives the orders, she commands the real business in the home, and she controls him. And when he tries to, some people would say, man up, she says, oh, you don't like me, you're treating me bad, and so on. And because he wants to be a good elder in the eyes of the church members, so we are looking at church now. He wants to be a good elder. He thinks that, well, if it is known that his wife is controlling him, he's going to lose the respect of the brethren, and so he suffers. Is that something that does happen, or am I just using my imagination?
Yes, it does happen. So it does happen, yes. Abuse against men happens, and sometimes more often than we expect. Abuse against men happens in the church in secular society more often than we expect. Because I remember we were sitting at something, we had some Caribbean workshop, sociology, I think it was in my home country, University of Guyana, a group of people came, we were having a conference, and I think one of the presenters was from Trinidad, and she was saying that they have a particular program to target men who are victims of abuse. And some of these guys come, in fact, there are some legislation that are now being passed. Some countries have gone forward to put a men's affairs bureau, men's desk to deal with men. In fact, my country, they have not just a woman affairs, they have a men's affairs bureau to deal with this issue. Because when you say the woman wearing the pants and the man, it evokes a certain response from the man, the woman turn around and play the victim. So men suffer from emotional abuse at the hands of women. And in fact, the literature, the research is saying is equally the same. 1 in 3 males can suffer in a relationship from abuse. So it's not, no, we have to balance it. And I'm glad you say that we don't want the men to take us a task to think, well, but we're just saying that men, gender-based violence in terms of physical violence is more of a male perpetrator, but that's not what we're talking about here today. We are saying that both men and women are guilty of emotional abuse. So not only men emotionally abuse women, women also emotionally abuse men.
Now
that normally takes the form of verbal abuse, and a number of them. I think I don't know if we want to say what it looks like, but that you raise the question about men, yes, that is sure. And the thing is, and you're correct, men are often reluctant. And why? Because they feel embarrassed. They think that they would not be believed if they report it. And even that because I remember we had somebody from the Canadian Bureau who came and he was making that same point, you know. If a guy go and the woman talking down to me, she's doing so. I'm talking the secular world now. I hope that the church doesn't have that issue. What the police tell him, go home and man up yourself. What do you mean by go home and man up yourself? It means that go home and take charge of the woman. It means behave violent.
Now
behave violent. That's what they have to say.
And it's, you know, I'm thinking that the reaction of law enforcement officials when a man goes and reports that this is what is happening, some of them would not even say go home and man up yourself. Some of them would laugh. That kind of thing.
Call out, let's come and hear this. What this man said. This man got a woman doing so and so and so. Right. So we're saying that women can abuse men, and I will say how. Emotional abuse. I'm going to say how they do that. They can verbally abuse or belittle or humiliate just the same way as our man would do a woman. The woman can verbally abuse, humiliate the man, and they'll do that in front of your friends, your colleague, your family. They can be possessive, you know, and accuse you, harass you, because they want to behave jealous. They want to restrict your movement just the same. They may take away the car key, hide your medication, decide when you should go out and when you can't go out, who you should talk to and who you shouldn't talk to. That's emotional abuse just the same way, you know. They may try to control how you spend. You know, that's emotional abuse. You know, they try to may leave you or prevent you from seeing your kids or children. If you report, I put that in because I'm a Caribbean man. I'm talking to our context now because remember you talked to both the church and the secular society. You see, you know. And in that workshop that they're talking about men, the presenter said that men spoke to her in tears. Not that they don't want to take care of their children, but the emotional abuse. They can't stand it. The woman doesn't want them to have access to the children. That's a form of emotional abuse. That is punishment. For,
now, let me just add one other thing here. Because, you know, I'm glad we are addressing this afternoon. And I want our viewers to give attention beyond just listening for the 1 hour. Because commonly there are lots of things that happen that some people do not open their eyes to. When a man, for example, is told before his children, because he loses a job, let's say he's a construction worker, and for some reason or the other, you know, sometimes you have building boom, sometimes you have lows, and he's not gainfully employed at this particular moment, and his wife says to him, you can't even get a job, you're good for nothing, in front of his children, that belittles the man.
Yes.
And interferes with his emotional state of being. Now we are really talking about mental health.
Yes.
And so what happens now is that not only does he hear it from his wife, who is supposed to be his cheerleader, but he is witnessing a misrepresentation of reality in the eyes of his children.
Yes.
So sometimes the women, and men do this to women as well, they bring the children into the frame and expose the other's weaknesses, or whether it be reality or otherwise, in the eyes of the children. And that puts a wedge between parent and child, and that adds to the humiliation, if I may say.
Well, it's not only, there's two things are happening there. Is not only the belittling, but you're talking about the emasculization of the male and the emotional, what is the term we use? The emotional incest. Because children are not supposed to be exposed to that kind of a language or belittling of a spouse towards another. That's emotional incest. You're not supposed to be in the face of your children dealing with those stuff. Children are supposed to be safe. Because those kind of things threaten their own, because children, when that is happening, it threatens them, the children, and their security as well.
Well, you mentioned two things.
That's I guess when we're talking for the next time we talk about children.
But I do want to raise it here, just briefly, because you spoke about the emasculation of the male, and you also spoke about emotional incest. So somebody would say you're emotionally raping the children.
Yes.
But here's the thing that I want to point out, because we have to understand that one of the reasons why this has perpetuated throughout society is that, it creates a cycle, because these children grow up with a certain reality that is not normal. But in their minds, this is normal. And so some people, when they hear, I heard a testimony recently about, we're having Stewardship Week. I think one of the preachers shared a testimony this week, or somebody gave a testimony in church. When they heard about God as Father, because of the relationship they had with their father, because of what they witnessed at home, they could not bear this concept of, they saw God as a tyrant, as a wicked man, as somebody who is abusive, because that's what they experienced. And so the long-lasting effect of these breakdowns in family values go beyond you, and they extend to the generation that you will not see. It's pretty serious.
Yes, it is serious. The consequences, right? And a boy cannot see a father in God except he sees God in his father. A boy or a girl cannot see a father in God except he or she sees God in his or her father.
And that's something that our viewers must pay attention to.
Yes.
But let me hasten on, Pastor, because we are really interested in. Now we're saying
many things.
All of us in the church, and we're saying using the church as a mask, right? And that happens on two fronts. And I want us to explore this a little bit, because on the one hand, there are lots of people. I think we addressed this issue last week in a different context, but there are lots of people who are afraid that if they speak up, if they stand up, if they try to do something about it, it may hurt the image of the church. I want you to speak to that. So, because I don't want to hurt the image of the church. Imagine that I'm a pastor, and I'm suffering abuse from my spouse. And that gets out in the public. People are going to say, oh, the pastor so. And so I try to cover it up. Let's talk about protecting the image of the church as an excuse for not exposing the abuse. Or maybe I should not say not exposing, but not getting the help that is required.
Right. And people don't, that's happening because people have not been exposed to the education. And remember, I said the biblical education. And one of the ways in which we treat the whole process, intervention in abuse, wherever it exists, is education. Because, psychological education, you see. And apart from talk therapy, people need education, because education is power. That people may be in these situations and they're not even aware. That is why we put the signs and the symptoms to say, if you're experiencing X, Y, Z, 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 X, Y, Z, this is a form of emotional abuse. You're in an emotionally abusive relationship. These are the symptoms. When I talk to young people and about abusive relationships, I begin from the dating to show them, if this and this and this is happening, this is a form of physical abuse, this is a form of emotional abuse, exit that relationship. Education is power. If people don't know, they stay in a situation and don't even realize that they're being abused. So that is why the church is the safe environment for us to talk to this. The church must be a place where we have a safe space to talk to these matters.
So when you as a pastor in your local congregation, and again, I said last week, the longer I stay in this church, the more I'm in love with this church, because of the programs that we offer, the opportunities for education, for growth in various areas. But since we're dealing with family life, when you as a pastor decide to host a family life seminar, symposium in your church, and the husband and wife couple decide they're not going, they don't want anybody to run their house, they're really robbing themselves of valuable information that could make a significant difference, positive difference for their families.
Right. Because in we say we offer what is called sodas. This is the situation, right? What are the options? What you're deciding, and what attitude or values or behavior you're willing to change. That is actually what we are doing. But if you don't have the education, you can't make the decision. So what I'm saying, that here is where the biblical concept departs from what has become, as you alluded to earlier, what is societal norm, or what exists there in the social context. So I want to answer from a theological perspective. You see, God created humankind. And so that's why I'm saying that education is necessary in the church. Because what do we mean when we said, let us make man in Genesis? God created humankind. Adam is in plural in Genesis. And Adam is in the form of male and female. And Adam was created equal, male and female. So in Genesis, there's no inferiority versus superiority. So therefore, those who are misogynic in their approach are really misrepresenting Scripture. What was God's ideal? What God intended when He put the two together? You see, Genesis argument is never about inferior versus superior. It is from incomplete to complete. And even though sin messed it up, God came back at redemption and restored that thing. And what you said earlier, you were going up the street, I thought you were going, but you stopped short of the theology. What Christ actually did is that He restored woman to their original purity, that she has the value and the right to stand by the side of her man, her husband, as his equal. That is what the Bible says. And we go back in Ephesians and see that. How a man ought to treat his wife as his own self.
Well, I'm preparing a devotional for married couples, and you got me excited there, because that is one of the issues that I dealt with in detail in that. Now, I want to hasten on, because I'm interested in empowering persons so that they will know what to do. How do we avoid? So after all, we are God's people. We like to say that this is God's church. We believe in religious liberty. We don't have time to go into all of the details here, but we do believe in religious liberty. So we want to be able to give individuals the tools necessary to help them to improve their personal situations. Now, what we want is a situation where family members, and in this case, spouses, are free to function as responsible adults. I want to take my time and say that. We want a situation where spouses are free to function as responsible adults. So how do we achieve this? What do we need to do to ensure that families function responsibly?
Again, we have to understand, and the same thing what we are saying, we are standing the point, is that education. What is the family? The family is a place of socialization, the primary area of socialization. Again, that is education. And how we are socialized. We are socialized because the family is a place where you have subsystems, right? When a man and woman come together, that's the parental mother and father. Once offspring comes along, that's the parental subsystem, and then you have the sibling subsystem. But they are the head. And if the head is sick, then the system, that's why we take a system approach in when we're dealing with this. We talk about the homeostasis to be sure that an equilibrium, because if the head is sick, the body is sick because there are things that run in families and run in relationship. The society, the family is set up for the orderly functioning of society and for the socialization of those children if they're allowed to get that blessing of procreation, and the family is supposed to protect, to provide, to nurture, to do all of these things. So the family has a particular function, and it is clear in Scripture what the function of the family is. So if we are departing from that, then we are not functioning according to what the biblical ideal, because family is not a secular idea. Family is God's idea, and we are trying to make the point all the time that we have departed because of our sinfulness and our brokenness and what society, the social norms and the socialization processes that are going on out there. Coming back to when we start this conversation, why we have men who are misogynic in their approach is not nature, is nurture. Is how the male is socialized. If you're socialized in a patriarchal society where you see women as lesser than, and that they have to be treated a particular kind of way, then that thing is perpetuated, and it can be perpetuated generations down, because this is a learned behavior. We're not born this way. If a boy, so two things happen. You either become a victim or you become a perpetrator. And that is why the education is necessary. And there are some things that has to be broken. So we want the happy, healthy family. There are some ideals that we have to exist. And I want to say one home that is well ordered, disciplined, speaks more eloquently on behalf of the gospel than all the sermons we can preach. And I hope that my church members are listening to what I'm saying now in terms of what must happen. And this education we have right in our grasp.
So if I know of a situation where an elder is suppressing his spouse or his family, and I do nothing about it, I am...
You're equally guilty.
Precisely.
Yes.
And therefore, when the Bible says that if... I just want to put a biblical
We can't be silent. We have to talk to it, because remember we said last week about the conspiracy of silence.
Correct.
If we are aware, and therefore I'm saying that what do we do about it? We must cultivate in our church a healthy attitude, a healthy atmosphere, so a safe space where people can come to get help, to say, I have this problem and it is okay. Dr. Greene, Pastor Adams, I have a problem lately. I've developed a problem lately. I've not been talking to my wife as I should. I've been emotionally abusive to Carol. I need some time out to go and look after myself, to get help. I must be confident that I can come and say that to you without not being judged
and understand that you are going to get the help.
Yes, definitely.
And this is the point I want to make. The matter of mental health is so serious. And the way we have treated it in the past is unfortunate.
Yes.
We want now for individuals to appreciate and respect the fact. And which is why, as a pastor, when I realized that a couple, an individual is carrying so many offices, it concerns me. I have to make sure that individual has opportunity to build meaningful bonds in his or her family. So that if I used to tell my church members, listen, the church must never be an excuse for your family life to go downhill.
No.
We want to create balance. and provide opportunity to lift up and build up, not to break down.
Yeah. If we are doing that, we are creating and perpetuating a dysfunctional family, and the dysfunctional family will create a dysfunctional church. The church is as strong as the family that compose it, right? So if we maintain a conspiracy of silence, just like what happened, and that is why dysfunction and things persist and run in family after generation. The family is healthy when the family has, when somebody could get out of that system and seek help. Right? So we talk about enmeshment versus disenmeshment. You see? So when there is enmeshment, dysfunction takes place there. There's pain, abuse, all kind of thing going on there, but nobody could get out to seek help.
And Pastor, you're raising that at a time when we only have about 7 minutes.
Well, we talk the solution to the problem.
Because
the church is the family, and we're trying to make the point. The church is the family, so people must know that in spite of my pain, whatever happened to me, if I come and confess and cry that this is my problem, I would not be ostracized, denigrated, but I will get help.
And neither would I have to wonder if my information is going to be used as material for gossip.
Yes.
So when
or
we talk
against
about
me.
a safe space, that's the idea. It is perfectly okay to say, listen, I'm challenged now, I'm going through some issues. Yeah. I need some time to rebuild my relationship.
And I've had those situations. They'll come talk to me, well, Pastor, I'm going to step down because of so. I can't be leading the church and have these and these issues. Talk to me in confidence. Well, I appreciate that. So and so. Let's see how we can get.
Well, I was going to quote this text earlier. If a man knows not how to rule his own house, how can he rule the church?
Right.
So that must not just be the awareness of the individual who's ruling the church, but every member has a responsibility as well, because sometimes what we do, I'm this person's friend, so I'm not going to say anything. I'll still allow him because this individual has been elder for so many years. It's going to be embarrassing if I don't put him back. But if he needs the time to work on his relationship, we should give him the time to work on his relationship.
Yeah, we always say, no, we believe, no, not that elder. He cannot be emotionally abusive to his wife. You all are talking the truth. You're all lying on that elder. People take that kind of position.
and that is unfortunate. Just you repeating that has brought back so many experiences in my mind that I've had to deal with as a pastor. And I want to say that in case you missed it, I'm speaking to our viewers and listeners, in case you missed it earlier, we were making the point that cover up never helps.
No.
When a person cries out for help, we must not shame them or blame them. We must recognize that this is an individual who is seeking to get attention, and we must give that individual the attention that they're requesting. That is very important. Next week, again, we're going to be talking about child abuse under the mask of the church. And well, when we get to next week, we will deal with that. But let me ask you this question, Pastor. An elder or a pastor who uses a church as a mask for emotional abuse. I can afford to do these things because nobody's going to believe that I'm doing it. I'm in the pulpit. I'm considered to be the great evangelist in the church. Nobody's going to believe me. And so I do what I want in my home. My children know that if they dare say anything, they're threatened, etc. That's a bad witness. That's a very bad witness. The question is, what checks and balances can be put in place to avoid such?
Well, remember we said, we can come to the front, present a facade, but we should not be ministering or function from an unsafe. I think I made that mention that last week. We're supposed to be ministering from a saved space or from a saved position. And just like I said last week, once we are aware of that is happening, the person should remove from that position. That's what we said last week. Because we have to minister from not just a saved, but a safe position. Because we said that the possibility is that if we are dysfunctional and we are bleeding and we are hurting, we said that you will bleed on other people or bleed over other people that doesn't have anything to do with your issue. And hurt people. I think I made that quotation last week.
Yes,
I said that hurting people hurt other people. So in the same way, if we know for sure that this is happening, what must be done? Get the requisite help for the person, and we cannot have them lead, because this is a spiritual experience we're talking about. And this is warfare, because that person is vulnerable on many points. You see, right? So it's like, if I may use my English language literature, To Kill a Mockingbird. We cannot live one way at home and another way in the public.
So I would like to say, therefore, that leaders must recognize that in the church, you should not seek to serve out of selfish ambition.
Right.
It's not about status, it's about service. And if you are aware that your family life is not in order, again, the point you're making there, I hope individuals are not missing it. If I don't have a good relationship with my spouse, I am not going to be effective in ministering to other spouses.
No.
Because the theoretical alone will not do it. So we're talking about integrity.
And you're absolutely on point, because when I started family life education and doing family life education in the church, there are some people who call my wife aside to ask her, is the pastor doing these things that he's presenting to us? Is he doing these things at home? They asked her that. She told me so. The members asked her.
Interesting.
Yes.
So it's really important for us to recognize and appreciate that in God's church we do not serve from a worldly perspective. See that it is a service, and we need to recognize at all times that this is a spiritual warfare. I do believe that leaders must give attention to strengthening their family lives.
Yes.
And that is one of the reasons why in the Seventh Adventist Church we put so much emphasis on family life.
Yeah.
It's really important.
2 weeks in a year where we talk to this, that, and then we have additional programs where we are talking about strengthening the family and strengthening that unit. And each of the units are strengthened and functioning, and not dysfunctional, because dysfunction creates dysfunction.
Correct.
Right? Because we said, when we talked last week, we said that is why we have this ministry, family ministry. We talk to the ideal, and we are pointing people to the ideal, because all of us have been affected by sin and the brokenness. But we also admit to the pain and the dysfunction and the brokenness of our people, and offer a ministry of healing and grace and restoration. So all is not lost, right? No marriage is so bad, as Jonathan Trotman used to say when we come together. He and Martin Barrow were my colleagues. No family is so bad that it cannot become better.
And that's a good place to end today,
Yes.
because our time has just expired, really. No family is too far gone that it cannot be revived. If you are willing.
Yes, all by the power and grace of God.
By the grace of God.
Yes.
You can see positive improvements. Next week, we are going to look at the vexing issue of child abuse. It is something that has to be addressed. It is something that has plagued Christian churches, and it is something that every parent needs to be aware of. We're going to be sharing some very important information next week.
Yes.
And we want to invite all of you, not just to listen, not just to be present, but to tell your friends, your relatives, your neighbors, etc., to tune in. Until then, may God bless you.